so glad you've stopped in again for Pastor's Ponderings. I want to welcome you and take a few moments to let others find us and join us while they get logged on. We're going to, in a little bit, be looking again at one of the practices that helps us identify our true self. But before we look forward to that, let me just look back and say thanks again to everyone who came and everyone who helped support and the many hours that went into making possible PFUMC Outdoors. It was a grand day to be together, and again, as I mentioned the other day, it was full of so many different feelings. But it was good to see you. I know some of you couldn't make it, and that's completely understandable. We're still in the middle of this terrible pandemic, and it doesn't seem to be waning in these recent days. In fact, it seems to be increasing. And so I understand. Please keep yourselves, all of us work to keep ourselves safe in these days, and be mindful of those who have to be out and about, like educators and frontline people, like our medical personnel, emergency personnel, people who provide us food every day. We're continuing to be mindful and appreciative of all those folks. So I just wanted to say a word of thanks again for that Sunday. We're going to do it again November 22nd. We hope weather will cooperate. We have a couple of special things planned that day. We'll do our All Saints Remembrance, and we'll confirm our kids who weren't able to be ceremonially confirmed because of the pandemic after they finished confirmation earlier this year. And so there'll be some very special elements in that November 22nd service that we'll be working our way towards and preparing for here in the next couple of 3 weeks. So again, I appreciate you joining now, and I think give it a couple of minutes and see a few of you found your way, and maybe a few more will, I'm sure. But let's go ahead and get started. Let me give some background. Background is this. We've been working our way trying to understand the difference between the true and false self. And I think you go back and you can see those other Pastor's Ponderings. They're located on YouTube and our church's Facebook page. But basically what we came to see is that many of us live in a large portion of our life in our heads trying to think, this is the person I am. And it takes some real spiritual work and spiritual training, as I mentioned on Sunday, to dig around and get to that true self, whom God made you to be. It doesn't happen just by magic or by whatever means you think you might want to try to make it happen. It happens because you dedicated yourself to diving in and surrendering that false self and learning more about who you really are, who God made you to be, that true self. And so I started offering, last week I started offering the first practice, what you might do in order to begin this wonderful journey. We talked about Lectio Divina. You can go back and look at that one. It's basically using a passage of Scripture to let God speak to you. And today I want to move towards centering prayer and offer you a little instruction about centering prayer, its background, and give you a little bit of an example of how it works. So that's going to be our focus today. Some would compare this to Christian meditation. In some ways they're similar. In some ways they're a little bit different. But if you want to consider right now to be close kins, that's perfectly fine. There are numerous forms of the overarching title would be contemplative prayer. How do I pray so that I get silent enough to listen to the voice of God? Contemplative prayer. I hope you'll either explore some other practices or try these. These are two really basic fundamental ones that have been used now through the centuries. And pick one for a while and use that in your early morning time. By the way, breath prayer comes to mind, one I like to use. And all we're trying to do is to allow contemplation, the silence, the stillness, get still long enough to reveal our habitual and our egoic thoughts that tend to tell us who we are. We think that tell us who we are, and begin to rewire those thoughts, or actually rewire our hearts, so that contemplation, stillness, silence begins to have an effect in our lives, and becomes more than just a momentary state of consciousness. No, we wire our lives so that we truly see ourselves as God made us to be most of the time. All the time is moving on to perfection, as Wesley said, but most of the time. So, centering prayer, along with its sister discipline, Christian meditation, as I mentioned just a few moments ago. Centering prayer made its appearance in modern Christian practices in the mid-1970s. As early as the 1960s, Thomas Merton wrote a book. Obviously you've heard me refer to him enough. Thomas Merton wrote a book for the recovery of Christian contemplative prayer. And his concern is that while those who lived in the monastery knew about Christian contemplative prayer, he wanted it to find its way out into the highways and byways. Well, his response to that book that Merton wrote of trying to put contemplative prayer into the hands of the laity, Thomas Keating, another wonderful name, and John Main, who maybe is not as well known as Thomas Keating, responded to Merton's prophetic call to how can we get Christian contemplative prayer into the hands of the people. And they responded by developing a meditation method which they would call centering prayer. And what they began to discover is that centering prayer is solidly rooted in our Christian traditions now for centuries. And what they also discovered in the 70s time is that there was a hunger, a spiritual hunger for this kind of practice. It wasn't something that was newfangled. It wasn't something that we kind of globbed on from our Eastern practices of religious practices. No, not at all. This was a Christian practice that had been established from the very beginning of the earliest days of Christianity and just lost. So in the case of centering prayer, one of the audiences that Thomas Keating wrote to were to the young persons who were in the 1960s moving towards these Eastern religions to find their path, if you know what I mean. They were raised Christian, but they had learned about these meditation practices in Eastern religions that could change the way you perceive reality in life. And so Keating went about trying to figure out how he could challenge others and himself on how is it that particularly in the Cistercian monastic movement, how is it that we can find a place for contemplative prayer, meditation method, accessible to the modern world? Well, finally, in this struggle of this call from can we find it, what will happen, up rose Father William Menninger. He is the official founder of centering prayer, Father William Menninger. He discovered a well-thumbed book from the 14th century called The Cloud of Unknowing. And this is for the first time when we were able to root back. Centering prayer was not something that we're now creating, but it's something that has existed for a very long time. And I'm going to show you an excerpt from the book so you see its familiarity and maybe its newness to you at the same time. He wrote this in the 14th century, an English monk, Menninger. Lift up your heart toward God with a meek stirring of love. With a meek stirring of love. For a naked intent direct to God, or you try to get yourself intently to God, is sufficient without anything else. And if you desire to have this aim concentrated and expressed in one word, in order that you might be able to grasp it, your intent to be in union with God, take but one short word, he wrote in the 14th century, of a single syllable, And he says, clasp this word tightly in your heart so that it never leaves you no matter what may happen. Now, the key word that we're about to, the key word he makes reference to, we're about to show you how it found its way into modern contemplative centering prayer. Originally, when Meninger pushed this forward, he called it the prayer of the cloud. But centering prayer seemed to catch on better as Thomas Merton coined that term. It became a more inviting description of this practice. The practice caught on there in the late 70s and early 80s. It has grown steadily ever since. You may have had encounters with yourself, whether you may have been at a retreat or with a spiritual director or a pastor or a Christian formation leader. So, I want us to consider how to use centering prayer. And I want to invite you to consider using the 27th Psalm as a way to pray through these next 30 days or so. You can use the 27th Psalm not only to do it by Lectina Divina, and remember you can go back last week and see how to do that, but to also spend some time with the key word, the single word that grabs your heart that you can't let go in centering prayer. And combine together the practice of Lectio Divina and centering prayer over the 27th Psalm, I'm pretty confident that it will change and shape your life and introduce you to some practices of spiritual training that you will grow to appreciate, and I hope hold on to and continue beyond the 30 days. By the way, the 4 key words for the centering prayer we're going to do hope today is hope. Next week is shelter. Following that is presence, and then patience. But today our key word is going to be hope. Well, back to some practical instructions on centering prayer. It's similar to Lectio Divina. You want to find a comfortable, quiet place if possible. And you want to usually sit, again, with your shoulders and hips aligned and your head aligned, and so that you're attentive to that which is, you be a little more attentive to the voice of God. But you want to be comfortable too, so don't get yourself too stiff. You'd like to remain undisturbed for the period of time that you set aside, if all possible. That's it. One of the beauties of centering prayer is that you don't have to remain undisturbed. It can be done in the public place or in a place of movement. If you just simply find a place that you can sit and quiet your own self. There are a number of devices for centering prayer that have now developed where you can sit with cushions and benches and sitting accessories that can help you. They're widely available. But a standard upright chair like I'm sitting in here will suffice perfectly fine. In fact, this is one of my favorite chairs to pray from that I'm sitting in now. That's why I come to you from it. So once I've found myself in this, just maybe one more thing. It is recommended you do this daily, if all possible, because I want to invite you daily, repeatedly, frequently into the 27th Psalm. And many of the practitioners of centering prayer will oftentimes pray twice daily, one in the morning and one in the evening. Have a sit. I just want to encourage you to find a routine, and so you can begin to discover and appreciate these practices, these exercises that can get you a little more spiritually attuned with your true self. Now let me say a couple more things. We talk about the sacred word. The sacred word is hope. And so what you're going to do is, in a moment, you're going to use that word as a symbol of your intent for that day or for that sit. And all your intent on that day is to let God speak to you about hope in the silence and stillness. And then, of course, the following week, as I said, shelter, following week, presence, and then patience. So hope is our intent today in our centering prayer. So once you kind of get to your place, you're comfortable, you're sitting in your place, I recommend closing your eyes. There is the half squint, and to find a focus point. Closing your eyes is, I don't recommend that. I do both. And I think I like half squint. Of course, if I close my eyes, my head can be wherever it likes. If I do the half squint, I simply find a very spot in the room, and then I just squint my eyes. You can't see it over there, but there are some beautiful flowers sitting on a table, and that becomes my focus point. Now, and then you just start your practice. And what you do is you're rooting yourself in your intention for this day. Hope. I want to hear and I want to be available to what God says to me in the silence and stillness about hope. Now, 20 minutes can seem like a long time, and there may be a temptation to get absorbed in another thought. I made reference to I got to pick up the laundry last week at the Lectina Divina. But a thought, it can be anything. It can be anything that kind of grabs your attention. You become absorbed in that thought. And what you do is you go back to your sacred word. Laundry. Hope. And I let go of laundry. It's not, by the way, your sacred word is not constantly repeated. It's not a mantra like in some prayer practices. It is just used to focus your intent to hear the voice of God regarding hope. So anything that causes your attention to lose its focal point, an idea, a vision, a memory, an emotion, whatever you come dwelling on, a physical sensation, if it captures your attention, it's considered a thought, and you want to let it go by just simply using your sacred word. Hope. That's your intention before God's presence today. As you continue in that prayer period, thoughts will inevitably arise again. So you've dismissed one, you may have another, you may have 10 more. But gently, graciously, don't get upset about it. Don't let it distract you. Hope. Take your breath. Clear that mental debris and return to your sense of trying to be aware and available to the voice of God. Now you're going to need a timer. You can use your iPhone, you can use Siri, Alexa, you can use whatever you want to use. You're going to need a timer of some kind so that when the 20 minutes is up, you know your sit's over. And then once it's over, don't rush for the place. Take a few minutes. Allow yourself to come back to your usual state of consciousness. Sometimes I do write a little bit at the end of a centering time. This is for, if you want to move beyond the 20-minute time, there are people who mix in a walking centering prayer and a sitting centering prayer. And they walk in silence, and maybe some of you just would do that. That's another way to do the centering prayer, is to do a walking time. And you just simply keep your intent, your focus, your eyes open in this case, on your centering word, and just let God speak to you in the walk. How does that sound? Think you can do that? I think you can. And I've demonstrated, I think, enough of it. I'm not going to go back over it. You can go back and listen and see how it works. And I hope you'll try it, because I hope that the voice of God can speak hope into your true self in these uncertain times that we live in. And wouldn't it be wonderful to spend a week over the next week learning more about how your true self lives with the hope of God in front of you? Thanks for joining me again. I hope again you find this helpful. I know some of these things are maybe a new practice for you. If you have questions or thoughts or things you want to discuss, I'm always available to do that, whether that be by phone, however you want to discuss that. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for again stopping by, and I wish you a good rest of your day and week. Take care now. Bye.